Attention humanitarian and development professionals. Are you looking to take your career to the next level? Then you've come to the right place. Humanitarian Global offers self-paced online courses designed specifically for you. With our comprehensive curriculum, you'll build your capacity in the most critical areas of humanitarian and development work. Our course offerings include monitoring, evaluation, accountability and learning, water, sanitation and hygiene, disaster risk reduction and management, food security and nutrition in emergencies, procurement and supply chain management, human nutrition and dietetics, maternal, infant and young child nutrition. With Humanitarian Global, you'll have the opportunity to grow your skills and impact the lives of people in need. Visit our website to learn more about our courses and apply today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is on monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. The topic for today is understanding the core elements of the theory of change model. So today's webinar focuses a lot on theory of change. And with us, we have our key speaker, Kevin Kadiri, who is organizational development and meal professional. And he'll be taking us through the topic. Just a quick reminder, the topic is understanding the core elements of the theory of change model. So before we dive into today's webinar, I would like to just mention a few house rules. So house rule number one is make good use of the chat section, make good use of the Q&A section. We are able to pick up your chats. We are able to see where you're joining from when you tell us, hello, I'm joining from Gambia, I'm joining from Zimbabwe. We are able to see that. So make good use of the chat section. Only the hosts are able to see the chat, the host and panelists. So sometimes you might need a little bit more information. You might need our team to reach out to you. So feel free to share your contact details. It's only the team whom I'll be introducing shortly who are able to see those details. During this presentation, our expert, Kevin Kadiri, will be able to talk a lot about the theory of change. Remember, today's topic is understanding the core elements of the theory of change model. So if you have any question that you'd like him to address, put that question in the Q&A section. And after his presentation, he'll be able to address all your questions. At the end of this session, as well, at the end of his presentation, we'll have a live Q&A section. So if you'd like to ask a question live, I will give you a chance to be able to unmute yourself and ask the question. So for this, just kindly raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak. So those are the three house rules for the day. Remember, make good use of the chat section, make good use of the Q&A section. And if you'd like to ask a question live, raise your hand. So with that said, I do welcome all our participants to today's webinar. I do see a lot more participants joining in currently as we speak. I'm just going to go right into introducing our team here at Humanitarian Global. We have a very big team. I'll kindly just ask them to say hello, starting with Anthony. Anthony, you can introduce yourself to the team and say hello.
Thank you so much, Diana, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our participants. We're happy to have you today join for this particular Zoom session. My name is Anthony Mkui from Humanitarian Global Academic Support Team. In case you have any challenge when it comes to your audio connection or maybe any other technical issue, feel free to chat me and then I would be able to assist you. So we're happy to have you and looking forward to a great conversation. So over to you, Diana.
Thank you so much. With us, we also have Ian. Ian, say hello to the team.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our session today. We look forward to a resourceful session, and for any assistance, any queries you may have, kindly engage us on the chat section or the Q&A section, and I will be able to assist. Thank you, and we look forward to the session.
Thank you so much, Ian. We also have Sheila with us. Sheila.
Hi, everyone. As you've heard, my name is Sheila. I'm the Academic Registrar at Humanitarian Global, and I look forward to a very engaging session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I'll just ask our expert, Kevin Kadiri, to say hello for now, before he comes in later to talk about today's hot topic. Kevin?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Diana. My name is Kevin Kadiri, and I look forward to taking us through this session today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So now I know you're wondering, who is Humanitarian Global? I would like to just give a brief introduction into who Humanitarian Global is, so that we are able to understand, even as our expert takes us through today's topic, you're able to understand who Humanitarian Global is. So I'll do a brief introduction and just talk about what we do here at Humanitarian Global. So allow me to share my screen with you. So once again, welcome to Humanitarian Global. This is who Humanitarian Global is. I believe you're able to see my screen from wherever you are. So Humanitarian Global is primarily a training institution. Who we are, Humanitarian Global, we do provide a platform that supports learning, interaction to all humanitarian professionals across the world. And this is in order to empower them through quality training, through quality courses, through quality education to create a global network of humanitarians. By this, we mean that we've been able to successfully establish collaborative relationships with humanitarian professionals and organizations in order to empower them to deliver exemplary services that will make the world a better place. By making the world a better place, we simply mean that through our innovative efforts, we are assisting the humanitarians, those in development and aid fields, make the planet more sustainable, make the planet just a better place to live in terms of assisting other people in need, assisting people who may not have the capacity to be able to achieve their goals. And this is through assisting in achieving the sustainable development goals by 2030. So here at Humanitarian Global, that is what we do through our vision, through our mission, through our goals. We've been able to assist organizations, we've been able to assist individuals in terms of realizing their full potential when it comes to development and aid fields. This is how we do this. This is our approach on this. So it's through organizational solutions, which include in-house trainings and workshops, as well as consultancy services, research services. We assist organizations in terms of team building, capacity building, as well as meeting their social corporate responsibility needs. We also do online training and online learning and virtual workshops. So this is in the different areas, such as for today, it's in MIL, monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. We do have water, sanitation, and hygiene, disaster risk reduction and management. We have food security, we have nutrition, we have maternal, infant, and health and young child nutrition. We have public health. We do cover as well procurement and supply chain management, project planning and management, gender studies, including gender-based violence, and MHM. We do have climate change as well, and anything else that covers the humanitarian field, including humanitarian principles and essentials. So through this, we've then been able to do community development through advocacy campaigns, through webinars such as today's, through community projects. As I've mentioned, we do engage a lot in corporate social responsibility, and also we do provide resources. We have our community forums that are really engaging. We do personal development, which includes providing career opportunities for our participants. So our impact overview, we have had a reach of over 500,000 practitioners, and this covers 50 plus countries globally. And although most countries are in Africa, we've been able to cover the Americas, Australia, Europe, Asia. So we're pretty much global. And this is through our 30 plus experts in different fields, in the fields that we're able to do the advanced e-learning and share resources and opportunities. We also do work a lot with organizations. We've been able to have a reach of 500 plus organizations. And some of these organizations include Living Water, Plant International, UNEP, Mercy Corps, Torch, World Food Program, just to name a few. And this is through conducting needs assessment, advocacy campaigns, corporate social responsibility, as I've talked about, and team building as well. Some of the organizations that we've also been able to train, because we also do in-person organizational training depending on the needs assessment that we've done for those organizations, include Living Water and Torch, where we're able to train on WASH as well as menstrual hygiene management. We really do have a 360 view on the kind of education, on the kind of services that we do provide. So we don't only look at your academic progress here, but we also want to look at self-improvement, personal growth, and career development. And this is done through coaching and mentoring. We also do professional resume and cover letter writing and reviewing. We do facilitate a lot of online classes. And actually this coming month, June, we have quite a number of online classes. And by online classes, I mean where you're able to engage virtually with your trainer one-on-one. You feel like you're in a classroom. And some of these upcoming trainings, upcoming online classes include social behavior communication change, theory of change, SPSS, humanitarian essentials and principles, as well as menstrual hygiene management. So if you're interested in any of those courses that I've just mentioned, the online classrooms, please just put in your details at the chat or the Q&A section, and we'll be able to reach out to you with more information. As you see on the screen, we do really have a community, and we do really take care of our participants. We make them feel like they're part of a community, not just taking classes, not just taking courses here with Humanitarian Global. That just brings me to the end of introducing who Humanitarian Global is. And at this point, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Kevin Kadiri, who will talk a little bit about theory of change. Remember, today's topic is understanding the core elements of the theory of change model. So welcome, Mr. Kadiri. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Diana, for that wonderful introduction and just letting people know who HG is and what we do. Yeah, we will dive in straight into the theory of change and just understanding the elements. And like it has been mentioned, this is just a tip of the iceberg. When you join our courses, we'll be able to dig deeper. We'll be able to do a bit more than we are able to do today because of the time limitation. So I welcome you to go through, because today we'll just be looking at the elements. So we'll not go into the details of the processes of how to develop a theory of change, the 6 steps and so on. But today we'll mainly focus on just a brief of the key elements, or some of the things that as you develop your theory of change, you really need to be keen on and you really need to check. So I'm sharing my screen. Please, in the chat box, kindly confirm if you can see my screen so that we proceed together. Thank you. Thank you, Festus. Thank you, Poko. Thank you, Lillian. Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, Elizabeth, Ken, Kamaliza, Frederick. Thank you so much. I now have the confidence to proceed with that confirmation that we are all together. So today we will go in the next couple of minutes just to understand what are the elements of a theory of change. And this is a very important document, actually, that I would encourage all development and humanitarian practitioners, even those in the peace and conflict or peace and security sector, to have it, because it's very important, especially if you want to do a very good monitoring and evaluation. And as we proceed on, we'll see why it's a very important tool So just to begin by brief definitions, theory of change or theories of change, these are the ideas and hypotheses. Basically they're the theories of how we as development practitioners, we as organizations, we as people have about how change happens. So they're the theories, they're the things, the theories that we think or see, the ideas, the hypothesis that this is we as an organization, this is how we see change happening. We as a people, this is how we see change happening. And I know even when you look at your development documents for your nations or the countries that we come from, most of the countries will have a document, Vision 2030, AU, we have, I think, Vision 2050. As a world, we have, the Sustainable Development Goals. And these are our ideas of what we want to see. And when you dig deep into those documents, they try to also explain how we see this change happening. What do we need to do so that by this particular year, we are in this state? How do we move from one state to the other state, and how does this change happen? So those are the things, or those are the ideas that we call the theory of change, and it can be conscious or unconscious. And most of the time, they're based on personal beliefs, assumptions, and are necessarily limited personal perception of reality. What this means is that when we call them theories, and when you develop this theory that this is how I see change happening, most of the time is influenced, be it conscious or unconsciously, by your personal beliefs, be it religion, be it tradition, be it culture and customs. They influence because you believe if we do this, then this is what is likely to happen. But the reason that you say if we do this, this is what is likely to happen is sometimes based on your personal belief that for you as a Christian, for you as an atheist, for you as a Hindu, for you as a Muslim, if you do this and that, then you believe that this individual will grow to become this and that, they're quite often limited by our personal perception of reality, So articulating your theory of change will help you to understand the challenges and the opportunities that are available to your organization. And like I said, they form a very good basis for your strategic and operational plans. So it's very important for us to have this. And something very important as well, a theory of change or theories of change, you need to look at it from three perspectives. One, it is a way of thinking. Two, it is a process of critical analysis and reflection. And three, a product. Most of the time, and what I've seen most organizations and people do, they only focus on the third part, a product. So most people, when you ask them what is a theory of change, they will talk about the diagram, the infographic, that diagram that you have at the end with arrows and so on, or, the beautiful way that you have structured it, But we need to understand that a theory of change is a way of thinking. It involves critical analysis and reflection. How do we see change happening? What needs to happen between an activity and an output? What is going on in between? What assumptions do we have in there? What are some of the outputs, if we achieve, they are likely to lead to a specific behavior change in an actor or in a particular environment or within a people, so it really involves critical analysis. It involves a lot of reflection, so that you also try to eliminate the biases. Remember from the previous slide, we've talked about, most of the time they're influenced by our personal beliefs, perceptions, and sometimes they might be even far-fetched from reality if we are not careful. So a very robust and a very good theory of change will inform the program design. How? By making explicit connection between relevant contextual factors and the purpose of the program. So basically, the theory of change will clarify why and how questions of our programs and our design, So you'll be able to see the causal links between program activities and outcomes as you define the underlying assumptions. Again, many of our theories of change, rarely do you see people indicate assumptions, because there are assumptions. When you say that if we do these activities, then they will lead to these outputs. What assumptions are there between activities and outputs? What assumptions are there between outputs and outcomes? What assumptions are there between outcomes and the impact that you desire or the goal that you desire? So a theory of change will try to define those underlying assumptions that have been made that will facilitate or enable us to be able to achieve our program goals, and that will also assist us to select the appropriate indicators. So that is why we said it is a way of thinking, and it involves critical analysis, because the theory of change will also help you determine and select the appropriate indicators for your intervention. So most of the time, this is how change has been brought to us, as though it is a linear occurrence, that, if we have these inputs, if we have resources, if we have a trainer, a venue, materials, then we are going to be able to do a training. If we do a training on entrepreneurship, or a training on HIV prevention, or a training on climate smart agriculture, then we will have our farmers using modern farming methods. We'll have young people abstaining from sex or using contraception, or we will have, 1, 2, 3, 4. If this happens, then we are going to have a healthy community. We are going to have a healthy nation. We are going to have delayed sexual debut and the impact reduction in HIV prevalence, reduced carbon emission, and reduced this and that, and it looks like a straight line. And this is one of the critics of the logical framework. Again, that's another topic that we really look at in depth when you join the courses in HG, where it seemingly provides and seems to indicate that change happens linear. It changes linear, but that is not true most of the time. And that is what the theory of change also tries to address. This is how change occurs. Yeah, you put your inputs, you do your activities, they do not move you to the output you expected. It takes a different direction. It moves you up, down, sideways, But at the end of the day, if you're able to think through the pathways of change, which is what the theory of change helps you to do, to look at the pathways. How is change happening? How is it likely to happen? What assumptions are we having? Then you're able to have a good picture of how change is likely to occur in your particular sector or in your intervention. So most of the time, this is how change looks like. It is not a straight line like the red that we see, that within this period of time, we'll be able to achieve this if we do this. Most of the time that happens in vaccine programs, you inject people with this, then you expect they will not contract this, so some of those, could be straight line. But most of the time when you're working with people who think, people who change, with institutions, with communities, then change is not likely to be linear. So the basic elements that make the theory of change approach. Now remember, again, just like the logical framework approach, this is an approach that you don't do it, or you don't develop the theory of change during implementation. But it is advisable that at the start, as you are designing your intervention, you take time to figure out, how do we see change happening? What will make this change happen? How does it look like? And then you develop your theory of change. Now, if at all in your intervention you don't have a theory of change, do not worry. We have quite a number of evaluation methods that can assist you. For example, if you would use contribution analysis, then it can help you to come up with a theory of change, so that you are trying to test and see how is change happening. And then again, it is important to mention a theory of change is also a live document. So it does not mean if you develop it at the beginning of your intervention, it cannot change. A theory of change is not cast on stone. It should be able to, it's a live document. So as you continue implementing, you continue strengthening your theory of change, so that at the end of your intervention, you can actually have enough evidence to justify your theory. You know, you can test your hypothesis, you can test your idea, you have evidence to show. You know, if you're doing, for example, and we invite you to take our M&D courses, we can talk about this, you know, the different evaluation, impact evaluation methods. You know, if you're using a randomized control trial, you are able to have evidence of attribution. You know, you're able to attribute the causal links, you know, the cause effect. If not, then if you use methods like contribution analysis, you know, most significant change, then you are able to process tracing, then you are able to also determine contribution. To what extent or how much has our intervention contributed to the change that we are seeing? So some of the elements that are very important at a minimum, you must consider when you are discussing or you are coming up with your theory of change is the context for the initiative. Those of us that we were together when we were looking through the do no harm framework, you know, as a conflict sensitive approach or tool to use, you know, to determine how conflict sensitive your intervention or program is, we said that when you get into a context, then you become part of that context. So also in a theory of change, it's also very important to know and understand the context for the initiative. And this includes the social, the political, the environmental, technological, legal, you know, we know all these concepts, you know, the current state of the problem the project is seeking to influence, and other actors who are able to influence change. Again, when you look at methods like outcome mapping, again, you'll be able to see the three spheres of influence. You know, you have your sphere of concern, you have your sphere of influence, and you have your sphere of control. So you want to look at who are these actors who are likely to influence change in this particular context. Is it the members of parliament? Is it the community, you know, leaders? Is it the local authority? Is it the young people, you know, because they're the majority and they have influence? Is it the older people, you know, if that community has an elders committee, you know, who are able to influence change? So you need to understand the actors who are able to influence change, the social, the political, the environmental. What is this context that we are getting into? What is happening? Who are the people? Who's there? What is the current state of the problem or the issue we are trying to address? So one of the very key elements as you begin to develop your theory of change is context. You know, what is the context? Number two is the changes or the outcomes that the initiative seeks to support and for whose ultimate benefit. So here you are asking yourself, what change do we want to see? Who is changing? Or what behavior do we want to see change in the actors that we have identified? The assumption also here is that you've done a proper stakeholder analysis. So if you've done a stakeholder analysis, and we also have many tools that we can use for this, you know, we have the power interest analysis tools, you know, we have quite a number of tools you've identified. These are the stakeholders. So what behavior do you want to see change in them so that you're able to achieve the change you want to see in your sphere of concern? How do we see them change? What do we need to do to facilitate this change? So it's really important for us to figure out what changes do we want to see? Who is changing? For whose benefit are these changes? Remember, our third sphere, the sphere of concern, you know, we want to see the community change. So are our changes whose ultimate benefit? Is it the children? Is it the young people? Is it the government, the right holders, the duty bearers, you know, the moral duty bearers, the legal duty? Who is it that for whose ultimate benefit is this change? Very important. So context, then what or whom do we see changing? How do we see the change happening in them? And nowadays there are also methods in M&D that try to encourage us to look at outcomes as behavior change, you know, because sometimes we use it, the way we define our outcomes really limit us, and at the end of the day, you are not able to achieve the results that you hoped for or you intended to achieve because of how you defined your outcomes, how you defined the change that you want to see, how you crafted it. Yeah. Number 3, another very important element is the process or the sequence of change or the pathway of change that is anticipated. Remember, we said this is a theory of change. In research, this is what would have likened to a hypothesis, or this is an idea. So that what you want to see is that as we implement, and that is why we also encourage to be doing things like operational research in our interventions, so that we are able to collect evidence, we are able to justify when we say that this change happened because of this and that, or we contributed to this change because of this and that. You are able to show us the process with evidence. You're able to show us the sequence. You're able to show us the pathway. So it's very, very important. And remember, when you do the theory of change, there are those pathways that will be stronger than others. It will be very good if your theory of change can show which links are stronger than others. Because when you have the causal links, the cause effect links, some are stronger than others. Some are direct, some are indirect. So your theory of change, a robust theory of change, should be able to show us these anticipated pathways of change that will lead to the desired long-term outcome of our intervention. Number 4 is the assumptions. Yeah, we want to look at what assumptions do we have about how these changes might happen. You want to check on whether the activities and the outputs are appropriate for influencing the desired change or the desired direction in that particular context. So, and we look at the types of assumptions. I've seen many of us, when even we develop our log frames and you ask, when you look at the column on assumptions, you will see community goodwill, political instability, natural disasters. It is not that those are bad assumptions, but at our level as M&D practitioners, we need to go deeper than that. We need to ask ourselves, between the activities and the outputs, what assumptions do I have of how this change will happen? Because sometimes when you talk of things like community goodwill, that I will have political goodwill and so on, maybe the question you also need to ask yourself, what is it as an intervention can we do to be able to get this goodwill, as opposed to just assuming, and moving forward, as a good program planner or designer, or as a good meal practitioner, we need to be able to question. So remember, that's why I said at the beginning, the theory of change is not just a product. It is a way of thinking, and it is a process of critical analysis and reflection, which is really key. So you need to look at the assumptions between outputs and outcomes. What assumptions do you have? Between your outcome and your impact, what assumptions do you have? And we look at the 4 types of assumptions that we need to consider as we continue on with the presentation. Then we have what we all like, what we all enjoy, what we all love, the diagram and the narrative summary. In fact, quite a number of us don't even have the narrative summary. They only have the diagram. So the diagram and the narrative summary basically captures the outcome of the discussion. So remember, we are even calling it in our title an approach. So the diagram is basically a summary of this approach. Think about it this way. We've seen a problem. Maybe poverty is what we are saying is a problem. And the first thing we want to do is to identify what are these causes. Then we do a problem analysis, Then we identify there are so many things. There's maybe literacy, there's, skills, knowledge, blah, 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 the economic status of the country, how people understand poverty and so on. So you've come up, you've gone through the multidimensional definition of poverty, not just poverty in terms of resources, poverty in terms of voice, poverty in terms of choice. You've gone through all this, you've done your problem analysis, and identified exactly what strand do you want to now pursue, because you may not have the resources to do everything. You've gone ahead and you've done a stakeholder analysis. Who are the actors? Who has interest in this program? Who is being affected or can affect this intervention? you've done that, and from all these processes is where you're able now to come up with. So for us to change this, and this is the actors in the environment, this is the context we are operating in, how then do we see change happening? And therefore you are able to come up with a theory of how you see change happening among young people, so that they may move from one economic status to another, or they may have, choice and, voice and so on, depending on what it is your program or your intervention is focusing on. Then at the end, you present this entire process in a diagram, so that you have a one-pager that is able to summarize this entire discussion. So these things are really important. When you look at your diagram of the theory of change, for example, and the narrative summary, is the context explained? Because in the narrative summary, we expect to see the context. Is the context explained in the narrative summary? Do we have the changes, the outcomes, the change we expect to see? Do we have the sequence, how this change will happen, the pathways of change, the process, that if this happens and this assumption holds true, then this is likely to happen, and so on? Are we able to see that? Yeah, and if you see me using the if then, is because also in an ideal setup, you begin by a theory of change, which is, gives you the big picture. Then you move to the law frame and the results framework, so they contribute to each other, and they all add value when if you choose to use all of them. Can you see the assumptions? In your theory of change, can you see between activities and outputs, what are the assumptions? Between outputs and outcomes, what are the assumptions? And then, of course, you have the diagram. So this is very important as some of the key elements that we need to look at when we are developing our theory of change. Now, I want us to take a moment on the assumptions, because the assumptions are at the core. I would say they are the make or break of a theory of change. Assumptions, they are the make or break of a theory of change. Sorry. So what you need to look at, one, is that are the theories in your theory of change thinking, are they hard to articulate because they are deeply held perceptions that have become rules of thumb that are taken for granted? So you want to look at the theories, you want to look at because you see, when you think of the assumptions or the theories, they might be very difficult to articulate, because they are deeply held perceptions that in a particular community, regardless of how much you tell them how it's important for them to have an iron roof so that they're able to harvest water, they believe in witchcraft, they believe in voodoo, and therefore it doesn't matter how much information you give them, but until you deal with that deeply held perception that if I am seen with an iron roof house, then I'm likely to be voodoo or witchcraft or whatever, those things that happen in traditional setups, or not even traditional, things that we've grown up with and perception that we hold strongly, that if I do this, I'm likely to be passed away by my family, so those very important to look at that. Then statements about how and why we expect a set of changes to come about. Out these activities, so you really need to be careful on what assumptions do you have. Yeah, the operations, the causal links, how you see, like I will say, there are assumptions within that particular context that if they hold true, then you are likely to achieve your change or outcomes. Then you have the paradigm, or one out certain things that if things are done in this particular manner.
It's okay. We will give Kadiri a moment just to reconnect to the internet. In the meantime, as I've mentioned, if you're interested in the upcoming Theory of Change class, you can share your details with us in the chat section or in the Q&A section, and we'll be able to reach out to you. We've also shared a link for you, if you're interested, for you to register on this upcoming Theory of Change online class. Also, in this topic, what Kadiri is presenting, if you have any questions, if you have anything, any comment, kindly put it in the Q&A section. And after Kadiri's presentation, we'll be able to ask these questions. Okay, I see Kadiri, you're back. So continue kindly.
Okay.
Allow me just to talk a little bit about an upcoming training on theory of change, which is what Kadiri has been presenting. So this is the upcoming theory of change. What Kadiri has been covering has been a little bit of what we're going to cover throughout this course. And the training schedule will include a brief introduction into the theory of change, creating a theory of change, relating the theory of change to other logic models. I've seen questions on logic models in the chat. Impact stories, stories of change, impact stories on focusing more on how to package and how to deliver. So this entire course, online class, is called Theory of Change and Development of Stories of Change. And it's an online live class, as I introduced before. It takes four weeks. You'll be expected to attend at least 2 classes in a day, in a week for 2 hours. So a total of 4 hours approximately in a week. And with this course, you'll be able to interact with your trainer online. If you have any questions, you'll be able to interact with your trainer one-on-one. It's similar to being in a virtual class. This is a virtual class for you. It's very interactive. And part of our objectives is not just to understand the theory of change, logic model in terms of development projects and programs, but you'll also have an improved understanding on how the theory of change can be employed for learning and accountability. So remember, this is under monitoring, evaluation, and accountability, accountability, and learning. So under meal, this is a very good skill to acquire. It's actually one of the skills you're required if you're a meal practitioner. And for people who work in projects and programs, you're required to actually, one of the very first steps of you developing a project is actually understanding and being able to create logic models and theory of change models, such as log frames, M&E frames, and results frameworks. So under this, under this course, under this online class, you'll be able to achieve those skills. So we'll allow Kadiri to continue. And for those of us who are interested in this course, kindly just drop your contacts, drop your email address, your phone number, and our team will be able to reach out to you. If you have any questions on what Kadiri has been presenting on today's topic, also ask the questions in the Q&A section, and he'll be able to address it once he's done with his presentation. Kadiri, over to you.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the hiccup. I hope you can now hear me. Please just write something on the chat box for me to be sure that you can now hear me. Thank you so much. Yeah, really sorry. I'm not sure where I lost you, but now because of time, we'll share the presentation. So we'll just take us very briefly and very fast through the remaining slides. I was talking about assumptions, very important in a theory of change. And there are 4 types of assumptions. We have the causal links, we have the operational and the external context, where you look at, as you operate, what are those things that are in the external environment that you don't have control over, but can affect the implementation of your work or can influence the changes that you intend to see, either positively or negatively. Then we have the paradigm or the worldview. We have these worldviews that we already have, or we have actually gone through them in class, in interventions, and therefore they influence how we also see change happening. You might be going through human rights-based approaches, as a method, different ways of how to look at change happening, which might influence how, or the assumptions that we also have on how change is happening. Then we also have belief systems, different dominant belief systems in societies, that you assume, you have assumption maybe based on the belief systems in that community, and they can either influence the change that you intend to see, be it positively or negatively. Then we have, once you've developed your theory of change, a few things that you can actually look out for, or you can use, is there's a checklist. And when you go to some of these USAID and FCDO, they also have documents that you can actually go through to see what are some of the things that they actually consider as important when you're developing your theory of change. So when you want to check whether your theory of change is robust, it is good, and it's likely to strengthen even your M&D practice in the organization. One is the analysis of the context. So the question here is, does the theory of change make sense as a response to analysis of the context, the problem, and the changes needed? Do you have one statement that can sum up the theory of change? So those are the questions to ask yourself when you look at your theory of change. Number two, is there a clear hypothesis of change? Are the causal pathways well mapped in a diagram? That is in detail, including intermediate outcomes. There are no missing links. We don't have boxes hanging or statements hanging, but we can clearly see how change, the pathways, how you see change happening. That we don't have congested boxes containing several inputs. You just draw one box and write so many things in there, congesting the inputs, outputs, outcomes, or links. They're all lumped together. We want to see a clear pathway of change. We want to see you presenting the specifics of the program, not just generic, but specific to your intervention. That's why we said it's a process, and it's it involves critical reflection and analysis, and it's very important when you consider this, even as you design. You want to look at the assumptions. Are they very explicit, either in the diagram or in the text? Remember, in the fifth element, we said, you have a diagram and a narrative summary. So either in the diagram or in the text, are the assumptions explicit about the causal links, about the implementation, about the context and the external factors. We also want to look at, does the narrative highlight and describe the overall logic of the intervention and the key hypothesis which the program is based on? Is it clear? Does the logic make sense? Is it highlighted properly in the narrative that accompanies the theory of change? Then assessment of evidence. Remember, even if it's a theory, there has to be evidence that makes you think or believe that that theory can actually work. So is there a narrative assessment of the evidence for each key hypothesis? For example, you want to do an intervention with young people, and you want to do it interpersonal communication. You'll be forming small groups of 10 to 12, and you say 10 to 12, a group of 10 to 12 or 10 to 16 is effective. So what makes you say is effective? Do you have evidence that will show a group of 10 to 16 going for 1 hour or 2 hours is likely to understand more the concepts being shared than a group of 40 or than a group of 272 like we have today? What evidence do we have that by us as Humanitarian Global having a webinar on the theory of change with the participation of 269 and with people who can't see me and I can't see them, that they will likely understand what I'm saying and we'll move from application, from knowledge to application of knowledge, you know. So what evidence do we have? Is the strength of the evidence assessed? You know, does the assessment made make sense given the evidence that has been referred to? So the other things that you need to look at is the theory of change and the log frame consistent? And when I came back, thank you so much, Diana, I found you taking the team through the content. And one of the things that is covered in that training is how is the theory of change related to the other frameworks, the log frame and the results framework. So it's very important to make sure there is consistency. You know, when you look at the theory of change and you look at the log frame, are they speaking into each other? Or the outcomes in the theory of change, the domains of change, the strategic priorities there are very different from what we see in the log frame. Then you also need to look at the evaluation questions mentioned in the management case or in your proposal. You know, pick up on hypothesis and theory of change, which have a weak evidence base. So the evaluation questions you have, you know, and you can use the dark criteria, you know, if you're forming your evaluation questions and you want to assess whether they pick up the weaknesses in your evidence. Because remember, again, it's a theory. As much as you have evidence, it's still a theory that we hope at the end of the intervention, we'll have evidence to actually strengthen this particular theory, or, you know, probably say if we do it this other way, or even have an alternative theory of change. You know, for example, if during the evaluation you use contribution analysis, it will be able to strengthen and affirm your theory of change. If you use randomized controlled trial, you might have an alternative theory of change. So also when you're doing this, that's why we said it's important to start from the beginning. You are able to look at your evaluation questions and how they will either strengthen your theory or how they will add value to your theory, or give information on the weak points that you've identified in your theory. Remember, I said in the causal links, there are strong links and there are weak links. So as you do these questions, you want to find out, you know, is this really a weak link? Is this really a strong link as we perceive or as we think? And then just to get to the end, I think this should be the last slide. Why it's really important, you know, when you look at this in the context of the purpose of doing monitoring and evaluation, you know, it will help you to show where the program fits into the wider context. When you look at your theory of change and what change you expect to see, it helps you. You might see in the wider context, there is what the government is trying to do, there is what the global community is trying to do, there is what the sector you are in is trying to do. So it will help you be able to fit. When you attend these meetings and you are presenting your work, you're clearly able to show that by us doing this intervention, this is how we see ourselves contributing to this wider change in this particular context. It also helps you to clarify assumptions about causal relationships. Like I have insisted, you know, assumptions are the backbone, you know, are the cruise, are the, you know, make or break of the theory of change. So you want to clarify the assumptions about causal relationships, you know, that you have between your outputs and your outcomes and your long-term outcomes or impact that you would like to see. It also shows how program components will operate to influence outcomes. How do the different components work together to be able to influence or bring about, or facilitate the change that we expect to see? And then, of course, a good theory of change can help you identify the indicators. Because if you have described well the change that you expect to see and how you see that change happen, then it becomes easier for you to also come up now with indicators, be it qualitative or quantitative indicators. Then, of course, it helps you, like I've mentioned, to guide impact analysis and impact evaluation. You know, this is another whole area that is covered in humanitarian global workshops and courses and trainings on the different types of impact evaluations that you can do. So if you have a good theory of change, it will help you determine, do you want to do prospective evaluation? Do you want to do retrospective? Do you want to do effective? Do you want to do RCT? Do you want to do, you know, contribution? Do you want to do process tracing? Which evaluation analysis would you like to, impact evaluation analysis would you like to use, you know, and it's based on the causal pathways it is based on the evaluation questions that you have, of course, and the resources and skills that you have within the organization. Because of time, I will stop at that and invite back Diana to be able to lead us through the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I do apologize to our participants. I know time is quite short on our side. And because we did lose Kadiri for a little while there, as the moderator, I do request that you allow us to add on a few more minutes. 10 minutes will be sufficient in order for Kadiri to answer our questions. So in the Q&A section, in the chat section, we have so many questions, and I'd like to begin with Otieno's question. So why theory of change model, and how can the theory of change model be aligned with an organization's strategic goals and objectives? Kadiri, over to you.
Thank you. Why a theory of change model? Now, the theory of change, one, and basically, actually, it gives you a picture of how you see change happening. So remember, if you think about all your intervention, whether it's humanitarian or development, or it's in the peace and security sector, there is a change that you want to see. You either want to see communities live peaceably, you either want to see children's rights protected, fulfilled, you either want to see improvement in health status, you want to see improvement in income, you want to see food secure community, you want to see livelihood secured. So there are those things that you want to see, but the question is, how will that change happen? Who will change and whose benefit? So the theory of change helps you to respond to those particular questions. How do you see change happening? What do we need to do to be able to influence this change? So it gives you a broad picture. Now, when you look at it, remember the theory of change can be project-based. The theory of change can also be organizational based. So as an organization and you have a strategic plan, you have your vision, you have your mission. So the question is, how do you see that happening? So a theory of change can also help you. Maybe you have 4 pillars or 3 pillars in your organization, or objectives or thematic areas. Then the question is, how do we see our vision is a healthy community, or a community living in dignity, or a food and livelihood secure community, or communities, or a prosperous Africa, or a prosperous, Sri Lanka. So how do you see that happening? What do you have in place? So a theory of change approach helps you in that thinking. Remember, we said 3 things about the theory of change. 1, it is a way of thinking. 2, it is a process of critical analysis and reflection. And 3, it is a product. So it basically helps you to figure out how is change happening, or how will change happen? Who is it that will change, or we will see change? And that will help you even to develop your M&D system, based on the theory of change. Thank you. Diana?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kadiri. I have a follow-up question. So then, does that answer Ken's question on, are there a set of ABCs to mapping change when it comes to theory of change?
Yes. Remember, this is also not something, it should be as participatory as possible when you're developing your theory of change. So remember, when you think of it as an approach, by the time you come to the diagram, you should have even done a problem analysis, and you could use the different tools that are there to do problem analysis. So you have identified what is the problem, you've identified who are the stakeholders who are involved, and then you've asked yourself, so for example, for young people to delay sexual debut or abstain from sex, what needs to happen? Is it an issue of policy? Is it an issue of parenting? Is it an issue of education system? So you see, when you begin asking yourself those questions, then you ask yourself, so what must schools do? Schools must be able to incorporate, comprehensive sexuality education in their sessions, or this and that. if it's entrepreneurship, or we need to give skills and so on. So it already helps you. So don't look at it as an end in itself, but when you use it as a way of thinking, you're asking yourself, for us to see this vision or this change happening, what and who do we need to see change? And then that guides you in the process. And it's also, you know, a logic model. When you look at it, I think I saw someone asking what is the difference between a theory of change and a logical framework. The main difference is in the details. You know, the theory of change will give you a broad picture, but when you move to the logical framework, it even goes further to give you the horizontal and, you know, the zigzag logic, if and then logic, you know, so you are able to see the beauty with the theory of change. It does not present change as a linear process. You remember the slide I showed you how change normally occurs. The challenge with the logical framework, it makes you think change happens in a linear process. So that's why it's important to use all these tools to help you be able to have a very strong and a robust theory of change. Diana?
Thank you so much, Kadiri, for that. And thank you for answering the difference between theory of change and log frame, because most of our questions are on that, on trying to differentiate the two. And if you take the online class on theory of change with us, which starts soon, like I've mentioned, virtual online class, you'll be able to understand more on the differences between the different logic models and theory of change. You'll be able to understand the different frameworks and how they not only apply to monitoring and evaluation, but also to program and project development. So Kadiri, I think we can pick a few more questions. You can just go through the Q&A section. As Kadiri does that, I would like to ask for those participants who would like to ask a question live, kindly raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak.
Yeah. So Diana, I ran through a few questions.
Yes, yes, please do.
Okay, thank you. So George is asking, when writing an evaluation report, is it necessary or best practice to include a theory of change in the report? I think it is good because, remember, it's a summary of your intervention, so to speak. It shows how you saw change happening or how change happened if you're now doing it as an end of project evaluation. So I think it is good to include the theory of change, because assumption is it would be the basis even of developing your evaluation. And depending on the evaluation method you're using, you could actually develop the theory of change if you didn't have one. Can a project or program be implemented without a theory of change? There are many programs that are currently being implemented without a theory of change, but part of the reason we are having these conversations is to encourage us that for us to increase our chances of success, then it is very important for us to have a theory of change. And like Diana said, it is not only for monitoring evaluation, but also for program or project design, you know. So if you don't have it, it is good for you to have it, because then think about it this way. It's like you are running, you know, you are running towards a certain direction, but you can't really tell, you know, how do I measure, how fast should I run, at what stage, who should I run with, you know, what route should I use, which one is shorter, which one is faster, which one has less obstacles. So a theory of change helps you to, using that example, figure out some of those things. So it would be really important to have it, but if you don't have it, you can still develop it in a participatory manner. We've answered the difference between a log frame and a theory of change. Remember, even if you look at a log frame has means of verification. A theory of change does not have means of verification. You use the theory of change to develop the indicators which you'll be able to see in the log frame that you will not be able to see in the theory of change. So the logical framework goes a little bit further into details compared to the theory of change. How can we integrate the theory of change and outcome mapping in projects? From design, just from the beginning, incorporate, because look at it as an approach. Don't look at it as just a tool or a product at the end, but from the beginning. When you think of outcome mapping, you want to develop your outcome challenges from the beginning. You want to develop your progress markers from the beginning. You want to have your strategy maps from the beginning so that you're able to use it in your intervention as you continue. Maybe one last question here. What are the challenges that can occur during the theory of change? I think the main one I said is our personal biases. What we think, how we think change happens, and sometimes is not backed by evidence. So that might lead you to having a very weak theory of change. That's why it's important to have a participatory approach when you're developing the theory of change, so that you can incorporate different views, different perceptions. You can consider your worldviews, you can consider your personal belief systems, the context, so that you, as much as possible, you are objective. Diana, I think I might put a post there so that if there's anyone who wants to ask questions live, we give them an opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much. And at this point, maybe you can answer another question while I ask Robert, Jane, and Rayak to prepare themselves with their questions. So that is Jane Achieng, Robert Achia, and Rith Bayak. Kindly prepare yourselves with the questions. Kadiri, you can have a look at 2 more questions while we allow our participants to prepare themselves with the questions.
Someone is asking here, say the assumptions are missing. Eli Otieno, say the assumptions are missing for the theory of change. How could this potentially affect the implementation of a project or program? It can be very, the effect can be very huge, yeah? Because look at it this way: you've gone to a community, you want to, maybe you want to address something on disaster risk reduction, and you want to introduce early warning systems, So you go there and you begin by calling them for a training, and you call this training on a particular day, and nobody shows up, and you wonder, you did posters, you went around, you talked to the, the different people, but maybe the reason is just that, you didn't consider, you assumed a lot in terms of the context, how the people relate to each other. Are they able to sit together? Maybe you've even assumed the literacy level. So you're wondering, why are they not understanding what you're saying? But maybe you've assumed, you've gone there with PowerPoints and so on. You've not used participatory approaches, rural approaches, and maybe that is the context you are working in. So you are likely not to achieve your results or your intended results just because of not taking into considerations the assumptions that you have. You go to a particular context, you don't consider the social context, you don't consider the political context, you don't consider the cultural context. So you go there, and whatever it is you're trying to do for them, they see it is against their culture. So you see, if you don't consider those things, you will struggle in that community, spend resources in that community, and then you'll not be able to achieve your results. So it's very risky not to have assumptions. Actually, you probably have those assumptions, only that you have not articulated them. Because for you to say that we are going to do this in this community, and if we do this, this will happen, already there are things that you've assumed. Remember, we said the assumptions could be conscious or subconscious. So you might have articulated them, but they could also be just because of how you see things, your worldview. So they're always there. The question is, have you articulated them or not? You need to articulate them and bring them out. Mr. Linio Takane, in other words, is the theory of change synonymous to risk assumption in MIL concept? No, it's not synonymous to risk assumption, but the risk analysis will help you address some of the assumptions that you might have. So remember, we said it is an approach. And when you think of a project design, you will have to do stakeholder analysis, you'll have to do risk analysis, you'll have to do problem analysis, you'll have to do, quite a number of analysis, for you to be able at the end to have the intervention. So even by the time you come up with your theory of change, you have already done a risk analysis. And that risk analysis has been able to show you what are some of the assumptions you are having, and are these things that can be integrated in the project to address, or are these things that they are out of our control and there is nothing that we can do about. So it's really, really important. Diana, are the others ready, or should I continue?
Yes, Jane, kindly ask your question.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to find out what is the difference between diagrammatic representation of the theory of change and the conceptual framework. Because when you define both, the more does speak the same thing. So I just want to know the difference between the two. Is it the same thing, or is there a slight difference, or are they completely different? Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Conceptual framework is the broader term, is the big term of conceptual. We have, this is a conceptual framework. So the theory of change is a type of a conceptual framework. So you are right in that sense. Conceptual framework is the broader term, but the theory of change has now narrowed it down to, this specific model that we are talking about, And if you think about it in research, you would also have a conceptual framework where you have your variables, your independent, dependent, and confounding variables, But now you see that is in a research context. Now take that and bring it into a program context. You still have now the things that you hope, if you do this, they will influence this. Just the same way you look at variables in your conceptual framework if you're doing a research study. So the conceptual framework is the broader term, and then theory of change, you could say, is an example of a conceptual framework.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Robert, the floor is yours. Kindly ask your question. As Robert asks his question, I'll request Ellie Otieno and Bio Ellie to prepare with their questions. Robert, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Diana, and thank you, Mr. Kadiri, for the elaborate presentation. Yeah, mine is about the elements that make up the theory of change. I just wanted to understand a few things. Like Mr. Kadiri had said, one of the elements of theory of change is context for the initiative, the outcome, the sequence of change. But I wanted to understand if the theory of change also takes into account the sustainability prospects of the desired change. Like, for example, you gave an example of an approach of ensuring that the girl child delays sex. But in the theory of change, when we talk about outcomes, does it also swallow the sustainability prospects of that desired change? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Robert. Now, you ask a very pertinent and a very good question, because, and that again comes to the level of outcome that we have in our theory of change, where now, like what you're saying and proposing is that, can we look at our outcomes with a sustainability lens, so that we're not just looking at now, but in future, will these gains be sustained? So now the question is, Robert, if you want, like the example you've given, that girls and young people delay sexual debut. So if you want to sustain that behavior, then what do you need to do? Yeah, you see again, the theory of change comes back, that for us to have a sustainable change or impact here, then this is what we need to do. So look at it as it's still a theory, yeah, that for there to be sustained behavior change, or if for us to, for example, the example you've given on delayed sexual debut. Now, this is also a theory I'm putting forward for using that as an example. For me to delay sexual debut, then something has to happen with my behavior. I must believe that this is not the right time. I must believe maybe that, there is a time and so on, there's an environment and all that. So the question is, how will you make me change my attitude, change my perception, probably even my belief system, to be able to have that sustained behavior that will lead to sustained result or impact or gains, So again, once you develop that, then you ask yourself, what do we need to do? What do we need to track? Because sometimes many people who struggle with that question is because even when you look at the things we are tracking at output level. How many people we trained, how many sessions we had, how many activities were conducted, how many people came, and then we leave it at that. But we not go to the extent that was there a change in knowledge? Did this knowledge translate into practice? Can this practice be sustained? And what are the factors that may lead to this practice being sustained? What are we doing as an intervention to facilitate this happening? Thank you. Diana?
Thank you so much for that. And as I've mentioned, there's been so many questions on these charts, on the Q&A, and we actually do have a community forum, Humanitarian Global Community Forum. And as the next person prepares to ask their question, I will be sharing a link to our community forum. The rest of the questions, because of time, will be answered on that community forum. So it's up to you to be very engaging. Even if you didn't manage to ask a question on this platform today, you can always ask the question in the community forum, and our experts will be able to address it. I see a few people whose hands are still up. John, maybe you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank Diana and Kadiri for their good intervention. And my question is, so what kind of change can you bring when, for instance, the population or community have the bad perception of the organization on NGO you are working for? This is my question. Thank you.
Okay. Is the change in relation to the intervention or the people or the organization itself?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because generally when the population have a good perception in the for the NGO, and that's really good. But sometimes when the population have bad perception, sometimes they can be they can be targeted only when there's demonstration. For instance, in the humanitarian, you see sometimes there's demonstration against an NGO or humanitarian that's operating on the ground. So this is the question I'm trying to know. What change can you bring if there's bad perception of population in the community?
Yeah, thank you so much, John. That's a very good question. And part of it you've already answered by saying they have a bad perception of the organization. So that becomes the problem. And that becomes one of the first things that you want to change, the perception that they have towards the organization, because you've realized that if they have a bad perception towards us, an organization, then we are likely not to achieve our desired impact or even implement. So you go back and ask yourself, why do they have a bad perception? And what do we need to do to change their perception towards us? So now we recently had a discussion about do no harm framework, And we said sometimes, because we don't realize the impact we have in the community, there are things that we may do. And we said some of the things are the behavior of the staff, the policies of the organization that can affect how the community perceive us as an organization. So I would advise probably have a pause and reflect meeting with probably community leaders or a section of the community and try to find out what makes them see this organization in a bad light. Sometimes it could be just one staff, that they don't like a certain staff or they don't like a certain behavior, or it was a humanitarian project and all the procurement was given to a particular community or tribe or company that they don't like. And those associations that you might not be aware of, but actually affect your work. So you can only know them if you take time to sit with the stakeholders, and this includes the community, the participants or the beneficiaries themselves, and have conversations with them. Then from there, you can together even design, a pathway of change, what you'd like to do together, how you see change happening, who needs to do what, and so on. So it will take a bit of time, but you need to invest in sitting down with the community and trying to remember, we say the first thing is a context. And when you're in a context, you become part of that context. So sitting just and finding out, where did the rain start beating us as an organization? And what do we need to do to change that perception that the community has towards us? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Diana?
Thank you so much, Kadiri. And as I've mentioned, all these other questions shall be answered in our chats. In our chats on our community forum. And please do join the community forum. It's very engaging. Not only do you get to interact with our experts, you also get to interact with fellow practitioners in the meal field. It could be in the wash field, anyone who's in the humanitarian development or aid fields. All these questions that are left shall be answered there. In the interest of time, for now, we have to say goodbye until next time when we will meet for another webinar. So I do wish you a pleasant rest of your day. It could be afternoon, morning, or evening, wherever you are. So have a good one until next time. Goodbye.
Attention humanitarian and development professionals. Are you looking to take your career to the next level? Then you've come to the right place. Humanitarian Global offers self-paced online courses designed specifically for you. With our comprehensive curriculum, you'll build your capacity in the most critical areas of humanitarian and development work. Our course offerings include monitoring, evaluation, accountability and learning, water, sanitation and hygiene, disaster risk reduction and management, food security and nutrition in emergencies, procurement and supply chain management, human nutrition and dietetics, maternal, infant and young child nutrition. With Humanitarian Global, you'll have the opportunity to grow your skills and impact the lives of people in need. Visit our website to learn more about our courses and apply today.